Have you ever had the feeling that everything was collapsing, even when you struggled to the fullest? As if, no matter how much they sought or believed, the answers didn't come. The truth is that we all face moments like this, phases when faith seems fragile and distant hope. But it is precisely at these times that we need to trust the most. What if I told you that the difficult situation you are living now can be part of a larger plan? What, behind the silence, is God writing a powerful chapter of His history? This video is not just another motivational message, it's a call for you to trust even when everything around it says otherwise. Let's walk together for 25 reflections that will arouse you a stronger, firm and unshakable faith. Because trusting God in every situation is not only possible, it is transformative. Losing something or someone we love is like having the floor torn under our feet. At these times, the soul shouts silently, "Why did this happen to me?" It is common to feel that God has moved away, that our prayers were not heard. But what if, instead of absence, is this pain an invitation to look deeper? Sometimes what seems to be an end, in fact, is the beginning of something bigger. Faith does not exempt us from suffering, but gives us a way to cross it with purpose. When you feel that everything has been taken from you, maybe God is just making room for something new. Think of how many biblical stories they started with losses and ended in victory. The pain can be the field where the roots of transformation are born. And that's where trust begins to be cut. Saying "I trust God" is easy when everything is in place. But when chaos knocks on the door, that's where this phrase turns into a real challenge. Trusting really means giving up control, and this hurts our ego, which always wants to understand, predict, and dominate. It is like walking with blindfolded eyes, guided only by His voice. And let's combine, it requires courage. It is at these times that we find out if our faith was only theory or living practice. When the plans do not come out as we expect, when the doors close, when the sky seems silent, trusting becomes a radical act. But that is precisely where the miracle begins to take shape. God doesn't need you to understand everything. He just needs you to trust one step at a time. There are days when it seems nothing is happening. You pray, wait, move, and silence remains. But what we forget is that God's silence is not absence. He is disguised action. God doesn't have to make noise to be operating. Sometimes He is there, behind the scenes, aligning details invisible to our eyes. Think of an embroidery on the inside out. It seems messy, confusing, meaningless. But, turned on the right side, reveals a beautiful design. So it is with our life. What today seems like a purposeless confusion, tomorrow can reveal itself as a divine masterpiece. God is never stopped. He only works at the exact pace of eternity, not our haste. A lot of people trust God until things don't go as expected. Then the doubts begin. Did He forget me? Why didn't it happen as I asked? This is the so-called conditional confidence, based on results, not relationship. But really, trusting is different. It is remaining firm even without answers. Even when everything seems opposite. Unconditional confidence is one that says, even if I don't understand, I keep believing. It is faith that does not depend on signs or immediate rewards. It is born of intimacy with God, not from the expectation that everything will be easy. When you learn to trust like this, you find that peace doesn't come from the circumstances, it comes from knowing who you are supported. Listening to a no of God can be frustrating. We pray, strive, believe, and yet the answer does not come as we expected. It makes you want to insist, to question, even give up. But what if this no is actually a disguised yes for something much bigger? God sees what we don't see. He knows the future, the risks, and even what we haven't even imagined yet. Accepting the no is an act of spiritual maturity. It is trusting that He is not punishing us, but protecting us. How many times have you thanked, sometime later, for something that didn't work out? Yeah, what seemed loss was deliverance. Saying your will is done is not easy, but it is liberating. And every no accepted with faith makes room for God's perfect yes. Sometimes it seems that life is leading us away from what we dream. Unexpected changes, paths that close, plans that saw dust. But God is not lost in deviations, He uses them. Each twist can be a redirect. What looks like a delay is often just a necessary curve on the right track. God is not a GPS that recalculates the route in a hurry. He is the architect who has already designed everything in advance. It may not make sense now, but up front you will understand. The turns, the stumbles, and even the setbacks are part of the cut process. Trust the tortuous road also leads to destination as long as He guides. Frustration is born when expectation does not find reality, and who has never disappointed with something that planned with all his heart. The secret is not to stop waiting, but learning to wait wisdom. When you cultivate constant confidence, you realize that what seems time-consuming can only be God's right time in action. Firm faith is not one that jumps into excitement in excitement, but the one that remains alive even at a silent awaiting. And this is gradually built in every choice to believe rather than despair. A practical tip: write every time God has already surprised you. Reread on difficult days. This will feed your trust and shield your heart against frustration. We often think we will only be at peace when everything is under our control. But real life shows the opposite. The more we try to control everything, the more anxious we get. True peace is not born of domain, but from delivery. When you trust that God is in charge, your heart can rest even without knowing what comes ahead. It's like being on a high-seas boat and letting God hold the rudder. The sea may be agitated, but the soul is firm. Practicing this in everyday life can be simple. Start praying every morning, saying, "Lord, take control today." And when anxiety tries to go back, take a deep breath and remember God is acting, even if your eyes don't see yet. Many people see God's commandments as a lot of can't and don't do. But the truth is that they are not there to arrest you, they are there to protect you. Like a bridge railing, they prevent you from falling when life's winds blow hard. Obeying is how to activate an invisible shield against hasty decisions and avoidable pain. God knows our weaknesses and knows exactly what can hurt us. When we follow His word, we are positioning ourselves within the safe zone of grace. Want a practical example? Living with integrity may even put you in uncomfortable situations in the short term, but deliver you from deep wounds in the long. To obey is to trust that God knows better, and that changes everything. The word submission scares a lot of people because it sounds like weakness. But in the kingdom of God, submitting is actually an act of strength. It is recognizing that there is someone infinitely wiser guiding everything. To give up the control is not to give up, it is to choose to trust who sees it beyond. It's like saying, "God, I don't understand, but I know the Lord understands." This delivery happens every day, in small decisions. When you choose to forgive instead of storing hurt. When it rests, even without answers. When it's sometimes silent, saying, "Do your way." Submission is freedom. It is getting out of the weight of having to know everything and rest in the certainty that God has seen the end and He knows what He is doing. Anxiety grows when our mind tries to predict all possible scenarios, usually the worst. But faith comes and says, you don't have to know everything, you just have to trust. It is like an antidote that neutralizes the poison of concern. When you activate faith, your mind slows down, your heart stands, and the chaos out there no longer mastered you that much. Of course, this is not automatic. It is a daily exercise. Every time an anxious thought arises, change for a promise of God. Memorize verses, write tickets with biblical truths, and spread around the house. This kind of simple practice strengthens your faith and weakens anxiety. Because those who really trust, rest even in the dark. Trusting in God is not something that happens by magic, it is a conscious choice made every day. And often this choice needs to be made even unwillingly. Instead of feeding thoughts of fear, you decide to feed your faith. It's like watering a plant. If you are constant, it grows. If you leave, it weakens. How about starting the day with a simple but powerful phrase? Something like, "Today, I choose to trust." Say this out loud, write in a post-it, put as a reminder on your phone. This little attitude helps your mind focus on what really matters. Because confidence, when practiced intentionally, becomes a lifestyle and transforms everything around. There are people who carry the world on their backs as if it were an obligation. But the truth is that God never called us for it. He knows that we are limited, fragile, human. And precisely for this reason, it invites us to cast all anxiety, all pain, every burden. Life gets lighter when we understand that you don't have to handle everything yourself. Do you know that feeling of exhaustion that comes from "I need to solve everything"? It disappears when you learn to share the load with God. Begin simple before bed, give Him the day. Tell as if she were an intimate friend without formality. Talk about your pain, frustrations, desires. You will realize that trusting is often simply breathing and letting God hold your hand. When you fully trust God, something inside you is released. Fear loses strength, anxiety weakens, and that invisible pressure to have to control everything goes away. It's like taking a weight that was choking you and suddenly breathing again. True confidence releases not only from circumstances, but from the inside out. And the most beautiful? This spiritual freedom spreads to other areas of life. You start to love more lightly, to wait without despair, to live with more purpose. Trusting God is like opening a window in a dark room. Light enters, and everything changes. If you are feeling stuck inside, perhaps what is missing is not a solution but confidence. Joseph, from Egypt, had everything to give up. Betrayed by the brothers, sold as a slave, unjustly arrested. It seemed that his life only walked backwards. But even without understanding, he trusted. And that silent confidence was what maintained his dignity, faith, and purpose. He did not let the circumstances define their identity. The most impressive? At the right time, God put him in a position of authority. What seemed destruction was, in fact, preparation. Joseph's story is a living reminder that trusting, even in pain, is never in vain. When everything seems meaningless, remember perhaps God is writing His own story of redemption as He did with Joseph. There are times when all that remains is silence. God's silence, silence of people, silence of their own soul. And in these deserts, it's easy to think we were forgotten. But that's where trust proves true. Joseph really trusted in prison. Even abandoned. Even when no one believed in him, he went on believing in God. If today you feel in a kind of prison, emotional, financial, spiritual, know that God is still with you. He doesn't need an audience to act. What He does in the hidden has eternal weight. Keep your faith firm, even if everything seems dark. Because the same God who was with Joseph in prison is what is with you now, preparing your departure in glory. Emotional slavery happens when we let fear, anxiety, or past dominate our feelings. And that sucks our energy, weakens faith, and distorts the way we see the world. But trust in God is like a key that opens this internal prison. It allows us to take a deep breath and say, I don't need to carry it alone. When you decide to trust, something changes. Emotions are no longer tyrannies and are signs which come, but they no longer control you. A good way to start. Practice what I call statements of faith. Say out loud phrases like, I'm safe in God, or nothing will take me out of the peace He gives me. Believe me, the power of the word signed in faith is transformative. Paul faced everything: persecution, arrests, wrecks, rejection. And yet, he wrote some of the most encouraging words in the Bible. He said he learned to be happy in all situations. This is not conformism, it is spiritual wisdom. It is understanding that joy does not depend on what happens outside, but what is firm inside. This kind of contentment is born only from full confidence. Paul knew his life was in the hands of God, and that was enough. If you are waiting for life to improve to have peace, you may be looking for the wrong place. Peace begins in the heart that trusts. Do it as Paul, decide to anchor in God even when everything around it shakes. Trusting God is not like pressing a button that solves everything at once. It's more like exercising a muscle. The more you practice, the stronger it gets. There are days when it's easy to trust, but in others it will seem impossible, and that's fine. True confidence is built in daily life, in the little sins you say to God every day. Do you know that moment when the question matches? Or when does an unexpected problem arise? These are the training camps of your faith. At these times, say, Lord, I choose to trust, even without understanding. And go steps, one at a time. Don't expect to feel 100 ready. The practice of trust is exactly that, walking, even with a tremendous heart. We live in a culture that glorifies the realize everything. But spiritually this can be a trap. The desire to control every detail of life only increases the weight on our shoulders. Free control is an act of humility and faith. It is recognizing that there is someone infinitely wiser guiding the backstage of our history. It is not easy. The mind wants certainties, whether security, guarantees. But God calls us to live by faith, not for control. Want a practical exercise? Take a paper and write what you have been trying to control and you are consuming you. Then pray and give each item to God. This simple symbolic act can be the first step for a much lighter life. When the present seems uncertain, the past can be a good place to renew faith. Remembering the times God sustained you, delivered you, surprised you, it strengthens your heart. Gratitude has this power. It opens our eyes to realize that if God has been faithful before, He will be faithful again. Because the character of Him does not change. How about creating a spiritual memory? Write down the miracles you have ever lived, even the little ones. Read this list when the question beats. This reactivates confidence and reposition you spiritually. It's like saying to yourself, I've won with God before. And they'll win again. The memory of Him's faithfulness is the fuel that keeps His faith on, even on gray days. Prayer is not just a request, it is a conversation. It is in this dialogue with God that trust is born and grows. When you pray, you are saying, I believe the Lord is listening. And even if the answer takes time, the simple act of talking to God already relieves the heart. Prayer is the place where fear crumbles and faith is strengthened. Want to get closer to God? Start praying with sincerity, without formulas. Talk like who talks to a father who understands you. It may be in the morning, during the bath, before bed. No matter the place, but the intention. To pray is to remember that you are not alone, and that, by itself, already changes everything. Because whoever uses it, trusts. And who trusts, rests. In the days when everything swings, the Bible is what keeps you firm. It is more than a book, it is the voice of God written, alive, present. When you dive into Scripture, your mind renews yourself and your spirit is strengthened. The Word as an anchor holds your faith when the winds of doubt try to drag you. Want a practical advice? Choose a verse a week to meditate. Write, read aloud, memorize. Verses like throw all your anxiety upon Him, or even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. They are shields to the soul. The more you fill the Word, the less space is left for fear. Because whoever really supports themselves does not fall. Trusting God is easier when you walk with people who trust too. The journey of faith was not made to be lonely. Being surrounded by people who pray with you, who encourage you, who remember God's promises in difficult days, is like having an emotional and spiritual security network. No one wins alone. If you don't have this network yet, start small. Look for a prayer group, participate in online Bible studies, send a message to someone of faith. God uses people to strengthen us. And sometimes, a simple conversation with the believer can rekindle a flame that was erasing. Communion reminds us we are not alone, we are part of a body. Trusting in God is not just what happens around us, it changes what happens within us. It brings a peace that does not depend on circumstances, a joy that is not explained, a force that is born in the invisible. When you decide to live with this confidence, it begins to experience a freedom that the world cannot give and cannot take it up either. Of course, it will not always be easy. There will be days of doubt, struggle, silence. But that's where faith shines stronger. Trusting is a journey, and the more you walk with God, the more you realize that everything cooperates, everything teaches, everything shapes. What was once weight becomes lightness. What was fear becomes courage. Because trusting God, really, changes everything. Now that you have come here, stop and ask yourself, in what area of your life do you need to trust God today? Which load is too heavy because you haven't delivered it yet? Remember, to trust is not to ignore reality, it is to face it with the eyes of faith. And this faith transforms everything from the inside out. Do not expect the circumstances to change to trust. Start trusting now, exactly where you are. Pray more. Read the Word more. Surround yourself with people who drive you close to God. Confidence is a decision that changes destinations. If this content spoke to you, share it with someone who also needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel and enable notifications to continue receiving messages that strengthen your faith and renew your hope. You are not alone, we are together on this trusted journey. And remember, God is worthy of your total confidence. Always.